Welcome two of our own in the public program series this autumn. Manuel Collado and Nacho Martín are here to present some of their recent work and research and thinking on their design agenda. And in fact, one of the ways to describe their interests as architects and their agenda is to remind you of an often repeated conviction of theirs that they see design and design decisions in architecture as a way to, in their words, intensify life. Whereas many architects will say that the decisions we make at the table or at the in front of a software program are design decisions that might affect or maybe even intensify form or structure or space or the relationship between architecture and the city. Over and over again, what Manuel and Nacho have come back to is this idea that it's the experience of the world that architecture can play a role in configuring and sometimes configuring and building in very unexpected ways, I think it would be fair to say. More on that in just a minute. Their studio, Mi5, which I'm always a little nervous to say here. Their design studio, Mi5, based in Madrid, with obviously an outpost here in London the last couple of years especially, looks for situations that very much amplify architecture's capacity to construct our experience of the world around us, and not just the physical space of a building or a site, but of a bodily experience of what the city or nature is. Since 2012, with manager Verghese, who's also here this evening, they have been the unit masters of Intermediate Unit 11, a unit that in short order will head south to the summer. One of the sub-themes of the unit is they can always find summer somewhere in the world. And they're about to leave to the bottom part of the world's largest continent in Africa, and in fact look into the convergence of the tribal past and the techno-futures of that continent and how they're reconfiguring our understanding of the landscape there. They were last year in Goa doing very similar kind of research, and the year before that in Ibiza, and every year winning the prize for by far the most compelling unit trip possible on the agenda of unit trips in the school. What's been percolating under the surface of that work is a very serious and sustained research and investigation of the way in which architecture as we know it isn't just a place to go to or a thing to look at or to stand within, but in fact is an extension of experience that includes all kinds of wearable technologies, our garments and fashion that in effect architects build routinely through far more than just the bricks and mortars of what we think of in our discipline. It is very much in their view an architecture that can be imagined by us as it is built by others. And over again, their projects have explored what the consequences of that might be as architects. Immersible experiences, I think, is the phrase they've come back to more and more. And for over a decade have been not just exploring this within their design studio, but teaching in schools, not just here, but also abroad and in their home country in Spain. We had the good fortune of meeting a few years ago here in the summer school, which they were a monumental hit in a couple of years running, and with that launched an agenda in the intermediate school that's now firmly settled in. They have taught fashion design at IED in Madrid, at UA Alicante and UJC in Madrid and many other schools. And along the way won competitions and built projects that have been exhibited and published around the world. Their buildings include the Zia, finished in 2012 in Spain, a sunken leisure center that I'm sure some of you know about, Ribas Vacia Madrid, in Madrid a few years before that, and so that I don't start making the Spanish too bad, I'll stop at the list there before it becomes just a total car wreck of an introduction. Maybe most interestingly, in the sort of key terms that they use routinely to talk about their interest and assert their belief in things like, I was just writing down a list from some of their writings, social fantasy, acid chapels, crashed meteorites, buried creatures, mutant flowers, space invaders, and other parts of the world we now live in, that rather than seeing that as a series of periodic and ephemeral interests, the flip side of that for everyone to realize is they've also recently completed PhDs in this world of interests. And in fact, one of the things that each of them individually have brought to those PhDs is something of the by now quite long and established late modern legacy of things like spacesuits, wearable technologies, and other things that of course have been for many decades of some considerable interest to our audience here. And for that reason, amongst many others, it's wonderful to have you in and for you to show where that work is right now. And thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Let me introduce our work, starting a little bit from the end, no? From a recent event. Probably you know it. It's the Venice Biennale. We were there last May, no? And of course, if you have been there, it's an amazing and powerful demonstration of a research. And in the end, it's more or less like a kind of what is the current trend in architecture. No? For us, this event was quite helpful, not because we were in the same vein, we were following the same philosophy or ideas, but because we were aware that we were in just the opposite point or the opposite state of this situation. No? At the beginning is it working? At the beginning it was a bit frustrating and we were a bit scary, but then we considered that it was not so frustrating because we understood the show like a kind of turning point in a certain way, and it offered us the possibility to understand that it could be a kind of alternative point of view or alternative point to create new points of view. We feel in that way closer to this diagram by Underwasser. If the REMS event was a show explaining that architecture is spinning around its own elements, its fundamental elements of the discipline, we think our work is spinning around another completely different point, that is the human body or the users of our architectures. And in that way, the architectural project is a kind of expansive or intensifying project that goes or plays in different scales, in different layers, like in this diagram, that can go from the scale of the body, from the body and the mind, and then to the others, the rest of the layers of information of the environment, from the body to the environment. And in between, the conventional, of course, format of architecture, all the buildings. We use quite often these images from a Mexican artist called Dulce Pinzón, that for us explains really well what is architectural or how our projects work in the city. No? It's like we consider our projects work like these superhero dresses, superhero suits, in order to offer the users or its wearer different capacities or different superpowers in order to deal with the environment in a totally different way. No? They, with this kind of new capacities, our projects in a certain way, they can see the city in a different way, they can feel the space differently, no? And they feel in a totally different position. For us, in the same direction, we see ourselves like these characters, no? Like in one hand is like those technical and professional technician, but equipped or armed with fantastic weapons, with that idea to shoot or to launch special properties or fantastical properties to the environment in order to balance that situation between what is the powers of the city and the powers of the users. with the same notion, we feel closer to the video game designers than engineers in that way. No, we use this image that we changed the name of the famous video game Final Fantasy using social fantasy. In that way, that with that concept of working with amplified projects, we see that we work in different formats and in different scale. No, from the scale, of course, of the sets of the scenarios. Then we would like to play with the script, no, with the different narratives around the character of these works, and of course the way we are able to transform the properties of the character. No, we can create like different identities through our architectural projects. In order to that, we have named this lecture "Improve Your Life with Architects," with Mi5 Architects, or with architecture. More or less playing with, like doing like a kind of self-help manual and those engineer labels about sustainability, etc., but a little bit less serious, no? Because we consider that we spend most of our time living inside buildings, and for that we think that architects are shaping our lives in a certain way. No? We can transform our mood, we can transform our feelings, our identity, our community, no? The way we relate with the rest of the people, no? Inside buildings, and in a funny way, or in a not very serious way, we have labeled the following projects with a kind of labels or stars, like calling them vital points, with that idea that the things we see in our project that are changing the life of the users in a good way.
Okay, so as Nacho was mentioning at the beginning, this sketch from Hundertwasser talking about the different layers for us was really like some sort of big definition, and this is exactly what happened here. Like it's one of those 10 vital points, probably number 0, and it's our unit doing some sort of interior training in Goa, in our trip to Goa last year in India. And I was talking about this Hundertwasser sketch because this is layer number 1. He was calling layer number 1 as skin, but this is beyond skin. This is the first architecture we are trying to create. It's about ourselves, the architecture that we start building, just breathing, just being aware of ourselves. And that's why we start our first project showing this image. No, there's no apparently any architecture, aside of course the volume or the room containing our meditation session. But there are like invisible energies that are starting there. And in this idea of jumping into the different layers, this is the first project we are going to show. It's for a fashion brand. It's a device for a perfume, to smell, to try a perfume. And in this idea of following the different layers from Hundertwasser is layer number 2. Let's say this is the skin, but it's an expanded skin. The idea is like an expanded sensory brain we started to create, in some sort of small-scale architecture, intense architecture. And it's an architecture for us that creates an interior landscape and a new relation with the body. It's about, of course, redefining of our identity through this device, but it's also about creating this new relation between the smell, an olfactory landscape, ourselves, the different states, different positions, different movements. And of course, this is about, as I was saying at the beginning, creating some sort of full attention device. It's about being fully present with an architecture, with a small scale architecture. And that's why we love this idea of intensity, of small scale, of something wearable. It's not the type of wearables that we are used to in the sense of Google Glasses, all these type of last technologies. It's more about creating a wearable with ourselves, a continuous space with ourselves. And intensify also the idea of an architecture. No? So using this idea of the 10 vital points of the labels, we start labeling this project with these 3 labels. Of course, it's about, in the left, about the smiley with a mohawk, about identity, but it's also about awakening our senses through this type of device. And of course, it's about fantasy, how we can redescribe, how we can create a new type of space, a new type of narrative through a small architecture like this. Next project. This is something that you'll probably recognize. It's here at the AA. It's a commission for our unit and for us 2 years ago. These are the strawberry tables for the graduation ceremony. And here, as Brett was mentioning, was one of our best words, let's say. It's about creating a tribe. And in this case, we decided to create a tribe with new graduated architects at the AA. So it was about, through the simple gesture of having one of those strawberries, we thought that this type of fruit can be some sort of radioactive strawberry. So through the simple gesture of having this fruit, we are like in a way re-energized, no? With this type of radioactive strawberry. And we create a whole community by this simple idea with framing or emphasizing these auras, these kind of explosions of energy, of radiations. That's what we like a lot, this photo, because even the kids, the families that are part of this tribe, the AA, the new graduates facing the world, a hard world, but with this type of good energies, even the kids had these kind of expanded powers, like superheroes, those great superheroes. So we decided to define these projects again with 3 labels. Of course, it's the creation of a community at the AA, a new community with new powers. Of course, it's about re-energizing, about on top right, re-energizing through a fruit and through the symbol of this radiation, of these explosions of energy. And of course, it's an awakening of the senses, of our senses, again, through tasting a fruit in a completely different way with a completely different narrative. No? So that was...
Okay, another story here close to the school, in this lecture hall. It was another commission we had from the AA, and was the designing on and the organizing of the annual celebration before Christmas, no? Our fantastic idea with Manije was to do a trans party, a trans tribal party. And for that, we started drawing, creating a kind of identity for the space on the skin of the walls, on the skin of the architecture. And then those patterns jump into the rest of the skins of the party, into the human skins, and with that idea of creating this multi-layer experience, with the idea of creating a super immersive situation where the architectural decisions are not only on the architectural walls, but on the rest of the experiences. Then those architectural patterns started to move because of the music and because of the performancers, and this immersive experience was highlighted by the use of the 3D effects, using 3D glasses, with where you can perceive the different colors in different depths, no? The idea behind organizing a trans party was, because probably you know a trans party is not a regular one, it's not something that you go just for partying or having some drink with friends. It's because trans party have this connotation of a kind of political gathering, in order to create alternative community for alternative ways of expression. And we consider this school is based in that idea, no? The creation of new subculture inside subcultures, creating new voices or new alternative ideas, no? And for that, this party rendered that situation. We consider a party one of the best reference to convey our conception of architecture. So this project has 5 stars, working with identity of the party goers, the performance, even the space, the creation of new communities, that is the AA, no? Communities inside communities. Have fun, of course, play and dance and etc. The use of colors as a great tool to intensify the architectural experience. And the last one, the creation of rituals. No? I think the idea of the rituals or the word of ritual is something that we use more comfortable than, for example, the program. No, I think the idea of a program in a building is something coming from the modernism, with this idea of you are going to a building to work and to produce different products. No, and the idea of, or the notion of the ritual is that you are to a place in order to transform yourself, no, through a different process. No, and for that, I think making rituals is part of our project as well.
Okay, good. So if the last project was about trans tribe, we love to start this project again with the photo of a tribe. This is a project for a youth center in Rivas, Madrid. We finished that, I guess, about 6-7 years ago. And the project started with this real tribe. I mean, that's the group of people that started with us a process of participation through workshops and through the group of, let's say, the very first users of the youth center. We started doing this type of open participation process where finally we managed to trigger all their energies, all their needs, what were they thoughts about a building like that, the symbolism of a building like that. And through these workshops, we finally get this type of, quite naturally, this type of images, this type of really spontaneous pop-punk icons. And through these pop-punk icons, we recognize, of course, all the information they gave us, because it was about breaking boundaries, about feeling like that. I mean, they were in the outskirts of Madrid, the group of teens were a bit in this kind of mood, with this kind of really spontaneous type of shouts. And the good thing, the interesting thing was how we, during the construction process and in the construction site, we managed to recognize how those cracks, those expansions and those explosions were starting to be crystallized, to be built, no, through different stages, and how we felt that finally all these energies, all these needs of breaking the box were translated into this building, this iconic building for us. And it wasn't just about some sort of random or frivolous type of pop, let's say, icons or cats, because from the very first beginning, we had quite a rigid volume. The client gave us quite a rigid volume, and through some geometric operations, we managed to create these cracks, these programs, all the light, all the volume that they need through playing a bit with the rules, with the regulations. We managed to create these heights and how we start playing with the cracks in a quite accurate way. We create these type of expansions in the corners of the building for the teens, and all the building had this type of narrative. Even some details, like for example, those huge claddings for us were like this expression of life, this expression of how life can come through the windows, through the big windows, and how we can crystallize, how we can build this idea of energy through some details, some construction details like these, like those huge claddings. But all the layers, it was to break the architecture in that sense, had for us a multi-layered experience in the sense of from the rooftop, the deck, how the cracks were integrated, how the rails, but then how even the ceilings were like an explosion of volume and energy, like reflecting these ideas, these tensions, and how even the plan was this reflection of the tension, of the needs of the program from the teams. So all the building, all the narrative was playing around this idea. And of course, the plan is a translation of this idea. It's where we can find, for example, this mix, and we love to play with this idea of having small and intense rooms where they can develop more of their private narratives in a way, how they can build in spaces more quiet, defining themselves, creating these identities, these tribes, but at the same time combined with huge explosions of program where they meet with the others, where they have like their first rituals. Even through the sections, through the elevations, how these ideas were translated. Big expansions using color in the main programs, in main rooms, and then how the more quiet areas, the more tiny spaces were with these more dark or green colors. Then, of course, the interior is much more about this. Is translating this idea in a really clear way, in the sense of, for example, through these jewels in the center, the small rooms. We had we want to translate this metaphor of creating really personal interior hidden narratives, and how in the corners, like in the MediaTek, we have this expansion of orange, with orange colors, with powerful colors. How, for example, having this chill out as a place where they face the sunset, they can, with these, using these lay down in those type of flaps or slopes, they can again define some sort of personal hidden narrative, and they can create like their identity in a way, in a really, it's not something that usually you can have in a public building like this, with public funds or resources. How, for example, then in this contrast between the small and the personal narratives and the tiny spaces, we have those big expansions of energy, how those spaces were translating, like this is where they train their bodies in a way, where their energies are like expanded, where they start using it and training their bodies in a really holistic way, doing many different types of activity, and how this is translated into cubic meters of energy, how this is translated into a huge volume, a huge expansion, a huge break, and how geometry can, in a way, be in a close connection with this body energy. Another space, which is the concert hall. How this concert hall is, for us, was we like to define this space as some sort of red church, is where they have like the first baptism, where they meet their group, where the teens have this type of first recognition in a way. How we like to feel that this space is like a ritual. It's creating a ritual. They are facing a symbol. They are facing their icons, which are of course the bands. The bands playing there. And for example, probably the most successful space, which is the MediaTek, where they listen and they hear to the new media, and they see the new media, they have a relation with the new media formats. They define, the current users are defining this space as some sort of teen chapel. Also acid chapel because of the colors, something that came up during the different visits to the building. And of course, this idea of having this excavated bench in the middle with a DJ booth. We love to describe this bench in a way as some sort of sacred fire. They just go around and listen to the music, to the DJs, and they create this type of sacred ritual there. In fact, the space is working like an extruded mandala in a way, and they are really creating an amazing ritual in such a place. A friend of us also said once he went there, this is like the 16th chapel of house music, no? And we really love this type of description, Manuel Collado. Then all the details, of course, are working in the same, with the same type of narrative. For example, the staircase for us is like some sort of thunderbolt, crystallized thunderbolt. Through the ascension, we are again being re-energized, going to this light, and finally we appear. We are here in this rooftop. It's a rooftop for open-air activities, also for concerts, also for open-air cinema, like there you've got this big frame for an open-air cinema. And we love to describe or re-describe this space as some sort of festival. No? It's a small-scale festival with this kind of orangey hard tents, and with spaces like this that it's been also redefined by the users as some sort of bere tent. No, it's like a jaima, and here they can also be partly hidden from the exterior during the festival or during the concert, and having this in and out, inside and outside activity. And we love that they had this type of feelings with the spaces. Of course, a building like this for us needed from the beginning something expressing the shout, the energy outside. No, so we decided to create this type of mouth, the red mouth with a huge sliding door, and how through this big mouth we can expand, invade all the program, all the life that is being created inside. And that's what happened finally there. I mean, this is what is happening now, and we had a lot of amazing feedbacks from the users, from the current users, but the place is really working. The place is really invading the outskirts of Rivas and the outskirts of Madrid with their rituals, with their festivals, with this life. And finally, well, we got this kind of satisfaction, no, from the use of such a building. And that's why we love to finish the explanation of this project with this, again, the image of a tribe. These are the new users, the current users, and we love to see those eyes, this feeling of proud, this feeling of having a symbol, having a place where they can create their identities, where they can be redefined, where they can finally get this type of happiness, no, in their faces. And we decided to, again, label with this project with those labels, with those vital points. Of course, it's the creation of a community. It's for sure the creation of an identity through the building, through all the narrative, how they managed to re-describe all those symbols, cracks, colors, a whole identity. Of course, it's about having fun. It's about, it's completely in the other side, no, comparing to the image of the Venice Biennale. It's, we can have fun at the Venice Biennale, but probably in another way. And it's using color also to be, in a way, re-energized, how colors can play a role for our identity, for our needs. It's about defining rituals in all the different, with all the different programs, and of course, fantasy, and how narratives can re-describe this life in a way.
Okay, more things. How are you going? Are you tired? We are starting, so. Okay, now, another story. It's again about giving life to a dead body, no? The way we were able to transform or revitalize a situation that was a building, an abandoned building. The commission was the transformation of the old town hall in Fuenlabrada. There is a town close to Madrid. And the idea was transform that old building that was a kind of dull and gray building that was a town hall, but then it was the final site, the final building we had to restore was the addition of, this is the original one, this historical building that was more or less interesting, but then the rest of the addition was really dull and gray and boring architectures. And in order to transform it in a totally different situation, that was a youth center, our idea was to remove all the built elements, to reformat, like in a computer, the original building. And because it was a kind of a strategy, because we had a super low budget for the project, and then only to create an architecture based on events or episodes without any kind of built environment, and just through the program and through the different activities and the way we were able to create the perfect medium to convey that situation. That idea of having an architecture without architecture, just with program and with information and with activities inside, this is the building. We started the project with a line of information, with a continuous line expressing what is happening inside the building, no, to the exterior, to the public space. And then that line of electricity, it breaks in a kind of electrical branches that goes and travels through the rest of the building, through the different floors, creating this image of an immersive space, playing with the lining and the reflection on the walls, using that deep blue color, to highlight this idea that you are in a fluid space, in a soft space, just organized by multiple and changeable events. For example, we try to design all the partitions with very light and transparent elements made out of those transparent rubber bands that you can move, no? Using the rails, the lining rails, you can move the partition, and you can create like different scenarios, create different spaces, areas. And because of the low budget and the program itself, we try to create a very industrial space, using, of course, very cheap fluorescent white tiles, the cheapest one, then the plastic walls, etc. And the final image was more or less like a kind of digital battery, with this concept of playing with the industrial image plus the idea of a software more than architecture. And something we wanted to highlight is this notion of is like a kind of supermarket of cultural program. It's more or less like a cultural convenience store, highlighting the idea of the easy access to the program, to the cultural program. And for that, for example, even with the signage, we try to reinforce that we are just labeling the spaces, no, just with putting names to the space, or for example, the signage itself is like objects that you can move in different places, changing completely the situation. The furniture is following the same concept. They are like mutated shopping carts with wheels that you can move from some spaces to others. And playing with a hybrid use of them, no? Sometimes they are a ladder to manage the installation on the electrical lines, but then there are some benches, stores, digital information through schemes, etc., etc. A 4-star project in our consideration, again playing with rituals, with that situation of moving on movable programs, creation of a community, management of the energies, no? And finally, the importance of understand that with architecture we are able to gather different peoples, no, in the same platform. No?
Okay. Next project is, for us, it was really, when I came across this image, it was quite a ritual. This idea of being there at the the construction site with the foundations, and this is our very first project. This is why it's a bit kind of ritual, of sacred type of experience. We were like 27 years old at that time, and we had a big commission for 103 social housing, a project of houses in Madrid, and the project was quite tricky in the sense that we had. The volume was really strict, and we had to compress all this program in a volume. And finally, we decided to create all the architectural decisions, to have all the architectural decisions in a skin, wrapping the building with some sort of technological skin. And that's why we love to describe this building a bit with these images. It's about creating, because those houses were in a quite difficult urban area in Madrid, in the outskirts, quite a dull and sad panorama. And we decided with those images to see the building as, in a way, a skin to, like this mask, for dust. It's a kind of protection. It's a kind of technological protection, but also it's about the redefinition of a narrative through the skin, through a porous skin. No, and we love to see through this image, this idea of redescribing narratives a bit in the Richard wrote the idea of metaphors, using metaphors to redescribe our surrounding, and. That's what happened. Finally, through this type of gesture, for this type of porous skin, we started to have life inside. We started to have new options of life, the different textures, through different perforated skin, through a different type of materials we decided to use. Also, even with the entrances, where we started to redescribe those entrances as the space, as a spaceships, the fingers or the entrances of a spaceship, using color to again re-energize the users once they are not trespassing, and having like a new opportunity inside to create a community, to create a new social hope. And finally, that's what we thought with the project, having all this intensity concentrated in a skin. It was some sort of also urban feng shui, in the sense that all the bad through this silver skin, to this type of mirrored skin, we bounce all the bad energies coming from the really sad buildings that we had around. And we decided, then again, labeling this project with to have these 4 labels. It's about some sort of awakening of new senses, of new perceptions through the skin, through the porous skin. It's about using color in a way to be re-energized to the different entrances. It's also about creating a community inside, and new options, new life, new opportunities, and of course, it's about fantasy. How through skin like that we can start redefining a bit ourselves. It's like using the helmets, like using, for example, the helmet we presented at the beginning.
Yes. Another project about dead bodies. It's a commission in Teruel. Teruel is a city between Madrid and Barcelona, and has the typical highly protected situation that is becoming a problem for its life, for the modern life of the city. It's not only a museum, of course, it's a real city, but the protection about the story, because of its historical importance, is becoming a real urban problem. This is the most popular image about the city. They are Teruel lovers, and it's expressing this idea of the best representation of the city is to that. Then it's funny that the second image you get on Google is talking about the same varied situation. It was about the same dead species, and it's because in that part of the country there was the first signals of life, of Jurassic lives. And our strategy as architects was trying to subvert that situation. This is an image from one magazine that we made when we were students, no? And this is the reason of our name, no? Mi5, because it was a magazine, a fanzine about the urban research and the investigation, and because of that was the name of the investigation office. And we in Teruel, no, with the commission or the brief of designing a multi-use center just in the city center, no, in the historical part, we try to play or to subvert the situation or try to find where are the vital signs of the place, no? And we love to tell this project, no, like like a kind of ancient beast came up, no, in the city, and through its appearance, it's appeared, no, like a kind of transformation of the urban fabric around it. This is the first mark of this new visitor, the new neighbor. It's a big hole, no? Is the side, no? And with this idea of having a big hole, it was great, no, for this context that nothing is happening there. So at the beginning, having a hole in order to fill it with new things, with modern activities. The strategy was more or less explained in these drawings. The site was occupied at the beginning with a building that was a market, not very interesting. And our idea was to remove the building and the existing building and then occupy the space, but not over the site, but underground, no? With the intention to create a new public space in Teruel and then cover it with a new plaza, with a new square for the city. The scale of the intervention was really huge compared to the rest of the scale of the city, and because of that, we try to camouflage these big new neighbors, as I said before. And the result is a kind of new, brave, and semi-buried beast that has this final expression of kind of new and totally different or weird visitor in the city. Because of that, we would like to call it Teruel Sila, playing in words with Teruel, the city, and Godzilla, no, the beast, but in a fun and in a positive way. And the energy coming not from the underground, from the ground where is based the beast, the building itself, is cracking and transforming the public space through different cracks. And we wanted to keep, in a certain way, the existing language of the place, the existing materiality, keeping the pavement, but adding new things, adding new expression, no? Creating new languages through the lining, through the furniture, through the different slopes, with ramps, open-air auditoriums, etc., etc. This is the expression of the intervention, no? Like a kind of big roar, no? Like saying, "Come here, no? Come in." And with this invitation, we try to create, like in this reference by Anish Kapoor at the Grand Palais, that situation of intense experience inside that you can go there in order to transform yourself and to recharge and to have a kind of renewal, no? This is the space for that renewal. We play with the image, like the belly of the beast, no? With different materialities. Some of them are softer, shiners, rougher, because you are in an underground space. Then the use of these suns, no, like holes catching the energy from above, from the exteriors, and then spreading it into the interior through the lasers and kind of light sables, no? And then you go down, no, crossing through the different facilities. Up there you have an auditorium, you are here in a cafeteria. Then you have sport areas here, and we wanted to highlight the situation that you are underground and you can feel the sensation that, for example, using this climbing wall. And finally, you get to the deepest level, that is a multi-use court. But it's interesting for us expressing the situation that you are in a quiet space where you finally have found what are the new powers, the superpowers, through this kind of magical and hidden cave. But then for us, what is the most successful situation is the combination between this underground level, but then the connection with the exterior, no, and the creation of a new of a new dialogue with the surroundings. No, how through this new public space or through new plaza is able to connect the surroundings and the landscape in a totally different way through for example, through these artificial gardens or through the different slopes. Again, the labels, the suns or the stars, the fantasies, the use of intense colors, the rituals, the management of the energy, and meeting the others. And yes.
Okay, I don't know.
More or less we are finishing, so.
Yeah, be patient. This is our very last project, it's most recent project. It's for a cell phone company in Russia. It's to design their flagship stores and then the other stores, no, like in a kind of expanded commission. And we started again with the idea of that probably today to go to buy a cell phone, it's the main ritual in the 21st century. It's a place, no, and I think Steve Jobs had this super clear, no, with the Apple stores. It's probably one of the places where we have this idea of something mythic, no, and going on around the simple fact of buying a device, buying something, no. So we decided to start with this idea of meeting people in a kind of magic circle. And that's why we love to use this image as a reference from the artist Mari Komori, the Japanese artist, how we like how she managed to hybridize the spiritual and the technological in a way. So starting from this idea, we started designing the totems, this kind of robo totems, where we did thousands of different tests and typologies, how they interact with the user, how they start talking or highlighting like the items, and then the results, the space, the shop was like this, no? With the different tests we did. We love this idea of defining a circle through these huge gems, these huge totems that at the same time can talk to you, and through the different textures, for example, like having this depth, this feeling of depth, of layers, but at the same time with the light, this kind of smooth light, we create a whole magic ceremony around the simple idea of buying a phone, no, going there and buying a phone. We tested like also different type of atmospheres. This is more like some sort of funny ghost, also jellyfishes. It was more some sort of happy atmosphere, reflecting with this type of texture, the colors. And that was another try with this type of fish, jellyfishes. And then we had this final result, hybridizing a bit everything, but also with the idea that probably the main the character of a shop like this are the phones. The sacred object is the phone, and we decided to create this idea of mini stages. How through these mini stages, with the totem and highlighting, no, the pieces, we create this type of shop, this type of magic type theater, magic type of theater, wrapping also the shop with some sort of curtain, with this gesture. The curtain is like a multi-layer experience with the screens, even incorporating the facade like in a multi-layered experience, and how this kind of huge curtain is like protecting a magic theater, no? Something like the one from the Steppenwolf from Hermann Hesse, no? So something special happening inside, and through the facade, for example, we started thinking about this trespassing the threshold, trespassing these different layers with textures, how this was defined through the details, through the construction detail, again with a kind of onion of different textures, and how it's the key, the components, different components of the facade were working like this, and how we tested all these different type of materials, LEDs, and effects in the facade. And the good thing of working in a country like Russia is it's a powerful country, so they did the first mock-ups of the facade like in a month. So we were there in the outside of the outskirts of Moscow, really cold, and in a warehouse they started testing the facade, the different materials, the textures, this frosted type of glass, and all the lights, and we really had this experience of depth, the first tries of the project that is right now going on, and hope we can see something build it in a short period of time. And well, we label it again with our vital points. It's of course about the creation of a community through the fact of going to buy a phone, the new ritual of the 21st century. It's a ritual, of course. It's about fantasy, how we can define a whole narrative in a shop. And of course, it's about using color, textures, and different materials to create an identity for a cell phone company. I think if we are running a bit late, we can go. No. And then.
Yeah, something that we wanted to bring here to this presentation is our task as teachers. Mainly here at the AA, because we consider this situation that is absolutely linked with the production of our office. No, it's not a totally different. It's not a different situation. Our work as an architect and then as teacher, but we consider is in the same research. This is a work that we have made during these last years with Supermanige, Burgess. And we are going to go quite fast. We are not going to explain the project, but just to compare the same strategy with the projects of architecture or the projects of building. 2 years ago, or 3 years? 2 years. Our first years we were in a very dull place called Ibiza. And the project was about redefining the concept of the club culture, the concept of the clubs, understanding them that clubs could be different places. Seeing them as places to transform yourself or to create new communities through the different experiences that you can get there. But we started not only playing with the clubs as buildings, but with the experiences of the clubs, and the experiences of the clubs start inside us, no? And because of that, always we like to start working with ourselves, with our senses, with our own experiences of as the beginning, no, of the different projects. The results of these works, of these intense experiences, if we are working with ourselves, the architecture that we create is very close to us, and because of that, I come up, these we are architectural devices, but they are architecture as well. They are what we call space helmets, with this idea of bringing the architectural experience close to your own senses and appear this hard experience that are helmets. All of them are our students, and then we jump.
Yeah, and we also had those really good examples from the projects as a result of the first year, for example, in Ibiza. This is a club from one of our best students, Rim, based on the experience of salt, how she managed to amplify the experience of a club using, placing the club in the salt flats, but at the same time enhancing the experience of the salt through different programs. How, for example, India, Jacobs, managed to create this community, this tribe in Goa, in India, a tribe basically disappearing in the forest, in nature, in a way to becoming one with nature. In this idea of creating a continuous experience from the body to the architecture, and for example, again through experiences, through performances like this. This was like it was an online meditation with a DJ from Los Angeles. The DJ was Diva Dompe. And through the costumes and through the meditation experience itself, we create a whole tribe, not whole really identity for the unit to start the year. No? Yeah. And those are our theses.
Yeah, we are finishing right now. It's again going to this journey through different scales and different formats as well. I think, for example, my PhD is till more or less from here to here, and Manuel is from here to there, no? And it's a continuous, and I think it's great, no? Because it's not like totally different researches. And my PhD was about fashion and architecture, studying the way architects work with different formats, in this case with costumes and with clothes and with suits, in order to convey in the better way its architectural ideas. And then,
then using this image from House Rukerkopf, this device, this helmet, to perceive the exterior in an amplified way, in a funny way, to redescribe the exterior. My thesis was about psychedelia and architecture, how the interior trip, the psychedelic trip, has defined in a way some sort of architectural behaviors, and how this psychedelia has expanded in a way a kind of typologies of different architectures in some sort of spacing out all these ideas, and that's what we've been talking about. It's been, I think, of course, as Nacho was mentioning at the beginning, it's probably the contrary, or something that our architects doing now. It's a bit celebrating death in a way. I don't know why, but it's about some sort of autopsy, because there's a big crisis. So we try not to get some sort of elements, fundamentals. But we think that architecture, it's about different fundamentals. It's more about ourselves. So it's more about these vital points. It's more about reinforcing your identity, creating your tribe and practices and rituals, enhancing your perception, having fun, enjoying the colors, intensifying your fantasy, amplifying your senses. Don't stop your training, because it's about using architecture, dance and eat well and meet the others. And I think this is our proposal. So enhance your life with MI5 architects, please. Of course,
thank you very much.
We want to thank everyone's collaborating with us, from Manage to our students at the AA, our unit, and all people that have been involved in the office during these years. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much to the AA.
A couple questions?
Yeah,
yes.
Sure.
Thanks. Do we have a microphone? Yeah, thanks. That's terrific. Tell me, fantastic kind of coverage of all of the work in recent years, and I'm wondering, and you use the word quite a lot in the presentation, this idea of ritual today, and one of the almost unrecognized features, in fact, almost a kind of fundamental feature of architecture, weirdly, is its capacity to create the space for ritual, right? And your point about ecclesiastical architectures and the ways in which churches have done that, and in a way, your recurring interest in that question of how rituals are constructed today I'm wondering what's driving that interest really. Is it that you see the world as becoming flatter and requiring, demanding that we find ways to amplify our experience? Like, is it just getting duller out there and we've got a job to do to try and remind people that they have this capacity? Or is it a way to, at the other extreme, the question would be, is this actually a way to reinvent what people think of as the fundamental features of an architecture in new and unexpected ways? Because surprisingly, as I listen to you present the work, in fact, it's a very disciplinary project in some way. It's not a new capacity of architecture that's being identified. It's just being thought of in very new and unexpected ways. Is this work on architecture, or are you running from architecture and thinking of the other realms where this kind of amplification and...
We are running very fast. But we are forced to run, not because of we want. No, I'm kidding. First, rituals. I think it's something that I have mentioned before. About probably the idea of rituals versus programs. I think program is something. It's a kind of heritage from modernism that you are going to those machines in order to produce like a machine as well, and you have like different activities like in a factory. And I think it's necessary to incorporate the notion of rituals, that you are going to the buildings not to produce more like a kind of machines. We are in a different age, absolutely, but I think architects, we aren't seeing very well this situation, and a ritual like in a trans party is like you are going to a place in order to get a better version of yourself after the activities you are doing there, or the people you meet there, or the creation of new communities, and finally it's more or less that the meaning behind the concept of rituals,
Yeah, I think it's also about this classic division, like architecture in a kind of dualistic way, something that we contemplate and it's outside and it's not in ourselves. And about experiencing, it's this idea of using things. How using things is something, it's much more continuous. It's not something that we can just rationalize in a way and just take components outside and just say, okay, these are our words. It's also how we use words. And I think now we are, probably because of the crisis, we are going to our fundamentals in the sense of the words, but it's probably beyond that. I think its fundamentals are more first creating spaces in ourselves, and probably this is much more sustainable and much more against crisis than trying to recover some sort of first elements in that sense. Again, frozen. It's like having isolated items. And probably for us, it's much more about the use of things. Much more tangible formats.
Just one other question that you're presenting it that I was trying to think through is is to get your. I'd be really curious to get your view on where you think the state of the project is in architecture today compared to, let's say, a Haus Rucker interest in things that I think are very close to your own. The idea of a wearable architecture, which, David Green in this building, Haus Rucker famously in Austria, but in fact an entire generation now nearly 50 years ago became suddenly interested in, and at the exact moment that McLuhan writes in Understanding Media that architecture is a kind of extension of the nervous system out into the world, and to go back and look at that, not to look at it, but to try and carry that project forward today. I'm just wondering, how do you see that project in where it stands today versus those kind of early examples? Is it a matter of trying to bring that project back into architecture in the world, or is it operating in a completely different kind of form today that maybe wasn't fully present then? I'm just curious what your view is on that as a project. So it's interesting, unlike that generation, is that it already has a very deep and long legacy, you could say, that you're also tapping into or plugging into in some way.
Yeah, I completely agree about this idea of revisiting this generation in the sense of I mean, the main ideas were for us are essential in the sense of experiencing things in another way, in the sense of because they were a generation after a crisis, after a world war, so there was something there about their attitude, no, the simple fact of trying to see things in a completely different way, experiencing things, and it's about going back to ourselves. That's what they did, and I think now, in a way, it's through this huge global crisis in terms of markets, it's like a different, of course, landscape and backgrounds are different, but the main ideas I think are the same. I'm not sure exactly about how to frame that in terms of new architecture, because they did some tries at that time, but it's been cutted, like from the 80s onwards. Let's say 60s architecture, Peter Cook and all these great architects just disappeared in a way in the academic, let's say, context. And now I think we can start revisiting them like in a quite different way. And for us, it's this idea of it being immersive. And I think now probably one of the best ways is new medias. How some sort of virtual, but not the cold virtual that we've been seeing till now. It's more like a much more tangible, a much more, how would I say that, jelly virtual, in the sense of we can go into and touch it. And that's something that we start seeing now at the office with different types of projects and technologies. And I think this is like probably the main door, the main threshold now to something else, something new that wasn't ready at that time.
You used this word before, jelly virtual.
Sounds good.
You're totally making this up on the spot, or this is one of your guys.
I think Manuel explained really well. I think it's a question of taking care of the bodies, no? And I think sometimes we are focusing a lot around the globe, around the planet, no? With the debate around sustainability. But I think sometimes architects we have forgotten it's not only about the planet, about the plants, about animals, but where is the human body, no? And during the certain periods, no, in the 60s, but as well, always related to risky situation of moments of crisis, exists the situation of taking care of the things and protecting the bodies and fight against the anxiety, no? And probably we are forgetting in the current architectural debate what happened with ourselves, with our lives, with the human at the center of the debate, no? Because or either we are looking at the architecture itself, or the rest are looking at the planet and the plants, greens, etc., etc. No? But what happened with us?
Just one last point, which is, I think the teaching is really interesting for you guys, is that the work on the sort of subcultures and the groups, rather than it being a project about just the individual body and single figure, is maybe one of the really interesting shifts that's taking place, not just in your own work as it's developed over the years, where the role of that group and the forming of the identity of a group is a key part of the project. It's no longer just the single figure in a mass or something that you could say is a big shift also from the 60s to a certain level, which was sort of obsessed with that single person being on their own. But I'll open it up to the floor. Questions, you all? Come on. Okay, if you had a question, what would it be? Let's ask it like that. Yeah. See if she has a microphone so she can.
Yes. Loud. From the eyes of a student and also perhaps future practice, and I was wondering which people you collaborate with in an interdisciplinary framework for the workshops, unit workshops, or your practice.
For example, currently we have in our office the typical geek, about technology, new medias, working instead of AutoCAD or Rhino, working with Unity, etc., etc. And for example, we are enjoying a lot. We are running a bit from architecture, but we are going to another architecture that we consider that it could be a possible future that is a new world, that is the virtual architecture. And for that, we are trying to hire in people with other kind of tools. And for example, here at the AA with Manager, we have been collaborating with fashion designers. First year we were with Roberto Piqueras, that is based here in London and is a typical really brilliant designer. Last year we were, for example, with a DJ, but as well she's a kind of therapist and music and musician.
We also had a yoga teacher coming to he's an architect, in fact. He's doing a PhD about Auroville, but he's really a yoga expert. And he came to our unit and we did a workshop based on yoga. So for example, for the RIBA's project, we started working with sociologists, and the base of the project was like how to create interactions with the teams in a really specific place. So we worked with sociologists there. We've been always involved with many different types of profiles.
But something that I would like to add to the typical idea of transdisciplinary is not, for us, I think, is more in the quoting Peter Sloterdijk, is not about working with different disciplines, with people experts in different disciplines. Is Peter Sloterdijk call it multi-virtuosity. That is the way we as an architects are able to work with different formats from our point of view. Not working with engineers and then with that is for us is the conventional organization. It's like the way you can transform the conventional format of architecture using different tools. No? And I think, for example, in my PhD, is like how architects worked with suits as the best format to express their ideas, or for example with psychedelia, and they can. So it's like the way we can redefine ourselves using different formats and using different skills.
Everything clear? Any questions? Your future as architects is going through.
Guys, thank you so much. Terrific.
Thanks a lot.